And another day, I woke up to the sounds of my parents arguing. I'm really about to not be able to stand this anymore. Hello everyone, I'm July. To hear more about my story, please click like and subscribe. Thank you very much. I was born into a family where my father owned a wine cellar and my mother was a former model. Their arguments happened almost every time it could. But the reason for all these arguments almost stemmed from my mother, who was always obsessed with her beauty. Even though we argue a lot, my parents also have things in common. My mother is a beauty addict who constantly buys cosmetics and attempts new makeup techniques, but she always fails. My father, on the other hand, spent the majority of his time in the wine cellar, attempting to develop a new wine flavor, but he was never successful. I was very lucky to inherit my parents' best features when I didn't need to wear too much makeup to be able to knock out any guy who saw me. Moreover, from a young age, I discovered that I have a talent for baking, and now I am the owner of a small bakery in town. Of course, my life would be wonderful if I didn't have to come home every day and hear my parents arguing. That day, I came home and found out that my mother had just bought a moisturizer at a very cheap price. But then things started to get worse when my mother applied that cream to her face and red spots began to appear. My mother now looked like a witch. In the end, my father had to spend a lot of money at the hospital to treat my mother's skin. But when we went to visit my mother, what she decided to do when she saw me and my father was to continue arguing with him.
It's all because of you, because you're not rich enough to let me buy those cheap cosmetics.
Without giving my father time to respond, she immediately picked up the cup on the table and threw it at my father. He was lucky to avoid it, but the TV behind him was not so lucky. The TV that my mother threw a cup at immediately broke, and as a result, my father had to pay a lot of money to compensate the hospital for the damage. But no matter how many times he had to endure my mother's unreasonableness or how much money he had to spend on her disastrous purchases, my father always had a love that could be said to be completely blind for my mother. Right after my mother almost had a cup thrown in his face, what my father did was go home and prepare a party to welcome her out of the hospital. I thought everything would work out because it was a very normal thing for my parents to argue and then make up. But that day, things happened completely differently. My mother returned home with unprecedented anger, and to mine and my father's surprise, she packed her things and immediately left. My father was so sad about this. I didn't see him for many days because he locked himself in the cellar. And of course, I also miss my mom very much, but life goes on, and if I also fall, no one will take care of my father and my bakery. It was many days until I saw my father come out of the wine cellar. He finally got over the pain of my mother's leaving. Our lives continued peacefully until the day my father announced that he had found a tycoon willing to invest in his wine cellar, and that he would now have enough resources to research a new flavor of wine. That rich man's name was Luther. I heard that he was a businessman who had just returned from abroad after many years of building his career, and now he wanted to spend the rest of his life developing the economy of the place where he was born. We were invited to Mr. Luther's mansion for a meal that night, and it was here that I met Ronan. He is Mr. Luther's nephew and financial manager. Since the day I was born until now, I have never seen a house this splendid. But all the flashy things in this villa immediately became overshadowed when Ronan appeared. His blonde hair and blue eyes can captivate any girl. I completely lost control of myself until I bumped into a table of food and made myself look like a chameleon.
Have you always been so clumsy? Or is it because of me?
Stop being delusional about yourself. It's just, the floor here is a bit slippery.
It's okay. Everyone knows that I'm handsome and talented.
My entire impression was completely shattered by Ronan after a series of sarcastic words and his arrogant attitude. He was truly a dandy, and I wondered if he could carry 2 boxes of flour alone, like me. From that day on, we regularly had meetings with Mr. Luther, and of course that annoying blonde hair was always present at Mr. Luther's financial manager. But things related to the terms of cooperation between the two parties weren't the only things this guy discussed. The things he mentioned always included how I looked after having a whole table of food spilled on me. Then, one day, as if he felt like he wasn't annoying enough, he decided to come to my bakery.
Hey, chameleon, I want the best cake in the shop.
What did you just call me? Blonde?
It seems like my handsomeness also affects your hearing, chameleon.
Then this chameleon will decide not to sell you even a piece of the worst cake here.
Come on, Julie. You should feel lucky that I appeared in this place. Doesn't the place need a bit of glamour?
He only left when I pulled out my rolling pin and threatened to flatten his face like a piece of flour. That evening, we had an appointment to have dinner at Mr. Luther's house, and while we were eating, a familiar figure appeared. That was my mother. It turned out that after leaving me and my father behind, she went to many places and met Mr. Luther on a cruise, and they accidentally fell in love.
It's a coincidence to see you two here. Luther, my love, I would like to introduce this to my ex-husband and daughter that I once mentioned to you.
Such a small world we have, isn't it? This will make our deal even more fascinating.
I wonder, for what purpose my mother loves this old man. Anyway, seeing my mother again made my father freeze for a few seconds, and his language was completely out of control.
Lili, but why? Anything, honey?
The next day, when I was walking home after closing my bakery, that annoying blonde guy appeared again, this time with his ostentatious supercar.
Julie, let me take you home.
Go away, blonde. Leave me alone.
Get in the car, Julie. I have something important to say.
It was the first time I saw him really serious like that. So I decided to get in the car.
Julie, this is not meant as a personal attack, but I have a feeling that your mother is secretly stealing money from my uncle.
Ronan, you can tease and mock me all you want, but I don't think this joke is funny.
I'm very serious, Julie. I've managed my uncle's finances for years, but I've never seen such amounts of money mysteriously vanish just like now. And I believe my hunches.
But Ronan, you don't have any proof. It's all just speculation.
I really hope I'm just overthinking it, but you know your mother better than me. Think about it. I don't know why your parents are no longer together, but why would a beautiful woman like your mom choose an old man like my Uncle Luther?
Ronan took me home and did not forget to remind me of what he said. Although there really isn't any evidence to prove whether my mother is really doing these things, through what I've learned about her through all those years of living together, what Ronan said really made me not sleep that night. But while I was laying in bed and thinking about what Ronan had said to me, I heard voices downstairs in the living room. I sneaked down the stairs, and it was my parents talking to each other.
Jack, I never really intended to leave you. You know I still love you. But for us to be together, I need you to do something for me.
Anything, honey?
Luther is an idiot. I've been secretly stealing money from him for so long without him knowing. Now I just need you to convince him to invest in your project, and we will have enough money so we can run away together without having to worry about anything.
I was completely dumbfounded when I heard that conversation. But what was scarier that my father nodded in agreement. Although it was heartbreaking, I had to admit that Ronan's hunch was completely correct. I know that I cannot stop my father now. He was completely blind to my mother and no longer cared about right or wrong. I need to find Ronan quickly to stop my mother before things go too far. The next morning, I went to find Ronan to tell him about what I had witnessed last night. Ronan, I know what my mother is doing is wrong, but can you agree with me on one thing?
As long as we can stop your mother.
I know my father is also a little involved in this incident, but if we can stop my mother, can you not prosecute my father? He's just a man blinded by love, and also, he's all I have left. Then Ronan suddenly pulled me into his arms and hugged me. Seemed that this blonde guy was not as uncomfortable as I thought.
I've already searched your mother's room but didn't find anything. We need evidence to expose her.
My mother has a habit of hiding important things in her makeup box. So when I was a child, I saw my mother keep a lot of money in a secret compartment that she created herself by renovating this makeup box. After Ronan distracted my mother by inviting her into the backyard for tea, I had the opportunity to enter her room, and very quickly, I found a secret compartment at the bottom of her makeup box. In it were a few fake IDs and passports, as well as a plane ticket to Switzerland tomorrow night. Tomorrow is the day my father will sign the contract with Mr. Luther, so my mother's plan is to run away after taking all the money. I have to stop her before it's too late. I gave what I found to Ronan, and we decided to expose her true face to Mr. Luther and my father tomorrow. The next afternoon, when Mr. Luther met my father at the mansion with my mother to prepare to sign the contract, I was there and observed, just waiting for Mr. Luther to pull out a pen to sign. I then rushed out, grabbed the pen, and threw it away.
July, why are you here? What do you think you're doing?
Dad, Mr. Luther, you two are being scammed by this woman. If this contract is signed now, she will disappear tonight with all the money.
Honey, you won't believe what this brat says after everything we've been through together, right?
She's not wrong.
Ronan finally showed up with 2 police officers and all the evidence needed.
One plane ticket? So you have no intention of taking me with you?
And suddenly, my mother turned into a completely different person.
Of course not. You men are a bunch of idiots. Why don't you obediently give me all the money you have?
She was taken away by 2 policemen while screaming, and my father was completely dismayed as he was once again hurt by her. I helped my father to the car and then went back to thank Ronan, but I heard unbelievable words from him.
Julie, wanna hear a secret?
And that is?
Actually, I really like chameleons. Can I go on a date with you?
Of course not, Bond. But since you kept my dad safe, I'll give you a chance. But don't you ever use that sarcastic tone again if you don't want me to hit you with my rolling pin. Our lives quickly returned to normal. Ronan began the process of courting me by personally reopening the contract between my father and Mr. Luther. And then it was as if he turned into a different person, so sweet and considerate. Eventually, I was completely conquered by him. My father got a sponsor, and he successfully created a new wine. Ronan then decided to offer his financial manager position to my dad, and got Mr. Luther's approval. He's now with me to build a little cake shop. I believe that from now on, we will really have forever happiness.